Jasper. Since X5 had been thrown off the Rhine viaduct, Jasper only needed to track 4 others on the orders of his major general, and by extension, Low King Citrine. He listened to X3 and X4 in separate channels of one ear, while listening to X2 and Basil in mirrored channels of his opposite ear. As X1, it was his job to ensure the safety of his fellow X-ranks, and X5 had already been his first failure. When X2 and Basil were near one another, Jasper surveyed the crusade party with his remaining spare eardrum. Mostly, he just heard rumors floating around the rest of the camp, but occasionally he received foreign news. Sometimes he would search for Bahantry members outside the crusade party or seek out double-crossers within it. When focusing on X3's surroundings, he heard merchant gossip, and when he focused on X4, he learned of the executive decisions of their leadership. While Jasper knew it was equally important to maintain awareness over the others, he couldn't help feeling drawn to Basil and X2. The group had grown close, and they found joy in their situation, despite everything that had happened. However, it appalled Jasper that X2 had let her guard slip. Anytime Anatase had snuck away from her newfound companions, Jasper tested her situational awareness. His breath was loud enough for her to sense him, but she never reacted. She could have been ignoring him, but he suspected that she was distracted by her potential mate. It bothered him. His loyalty was strong. He obeyed Citrine because he was a good king to follow, and Jasper would follow him until the end. I want to prove humans are worth living for. Despite his faith in them, he wanted to tug Anatase away from the dangerous men and take her to the Oracle, just the two of them. If they had started that way, he was confident that she would be spending her nights safely with him rather than with Brusite. Throughout their schooling under D4, Jasper hadn't understood her opinion of him. Her heart raced any time he was near, her pupils dilated, and she released pheromones that drove his heightened senses wild. He was certain his body reciprocated the physiological reactions. Any time they sparred and Anatase found an opening in his defenses, his heart would not listen to his brain to keep steady. Her black eyes only ever viewed the world through a lens of determination, and he wanted them in his life forever. But she was more stubborn than a great eland. As much as she was attracted to him, she must have also resented him. Perhaps if I had shown humility and allowed her to best me in combat, she would have dropped her obstinacy, if only slightly. But she wouldn't have improved as much as she has otherwise. I doubt she'd want me to let her win due to pity anyway. It wouldn't have endeared her to me. But what could I have done? For now, all he could do was wait. Wait and warn her if additional trouble headed for her. After they slaughtered the large group of rapists, all talk of future assaults ceased. D4 had declared exile for any who attempted to sexually harass women in the crusade or in the towns they visited. Despite both factors, Jasper still worried when Anatase removed her helmet to reveal her face. Conversely, he also thought she needed to feel unrestricted to recover. He hated himself for allowing the group to slip past him that night, but he stayed up the previous evenings, ensuring they wouldn't take their revenge then. He had to sleep eventually. Of course, he didn't stay asleep once he sensed she was in danger, but the assault had already escalated. Despite his best efforts, he blamed himself that she was ever in harm's way. If only I were a sorcerer and could have set a barrier or a trap for the assailants. However, Jasper was no sorcerer, wizard, or warlock. His magic was of an entirely different variety. In that sense, X2 had been his second failure. He should have invited her to his own tent, rather than lecture her to be more careful. I doubt she would have accepted. She's been standoffish since our first day of training, and I don't know why. Why does she seem to favor Brusite's company? Is he just some bumbling plaything she can laugh at? Or does she appreciate his gallant actions of amorousness? Does she find it refreshing that it's different from the ways men in the tribe might attempt to court her? Yet she outright told Brusite she wanted tokens reminiscent of her home traditions. Perhaps she simply finds Brusite attractive. When the three of them dined together at the Carey village, their interaction had been confusing. Jasper had seated himself directly across from Anastasia to catch more of her glances, and her posture had been turned toward him the entire evening, with rare glances toward Crusade. Yet when Jasper struck up a conversation with his former Carey teacher, the pair had forgotten him. Jasper didn't internalize the rejection. She had done the same to Unakite. Instead of drowning himself in self-pity and Carey wine around a crusade campfire, Jasper helped her half-brother hone his ambushing technique, since she wouldn't have a chance to help him herself anytime soon. It had hurt when Jasper and Unakite had returned with a freshly caught ermine in hand, just as Anastasia led Crusade to her chambers. It's better not to think of Crusade. The more Jasper did, the more his instincts turned agnostic against the fool. Jasper had cared for Anastasia since their days in Citrine's military academy, and he would have pursued her had she shown anything but disdain for him. He wished that she would be willing to hear him out, so he could explain his position, but he doubted that would be likely anytime soon. Even if she truly didn't reciprocate his feelings, he wished for the opportunity to earn her friendship and trust. It was difficult to observe her pursue someone else. Listening in on her interactions pained Jasper, regardless of how necessary it was, and regardless that his king had instructed him to do it. He wanted to close all his eardrums, if only for a moment. He didn't want to fake conversation with the soldiers around him anymore. He wanted to curl up in himself and sleep peacefully, for once in his own den. More than anything else, he wanted his task to be complete. Beyond that, he wished he could reverse time and restart with Anastasia. But that was yet another ability he did not possess. So, he would wait for his heart or hers to turn from its current course. He suspected neither would occur soon. In the meanwhile, he would have to suffer through hearing their kisses pressed against their partner's skin, hearing the little moans escaping from their mouths, hearing as their fingers clawed at flesh. It drove him mad. There were few women in the realm like her, and he doubted he could redirect his attention elsewhere. Spirited in the face of her setbacks, an adroit hunter with a deceptively innocent face, keen wit which rivaled his own, deep and driven eyes, slyly manipulative, but not without heart. Often she embodied freedom. He admired her directness and how intensely she looked at everyone when speaking to them. Her people loved her. She moved with the grace and poise of a conservatory dancer. He imagined her raven hair flying beyond her beautiful face mid-run. He needed to switch his focus before his body grew a new heart to defend against the aching sensation. Instead, he listened as Basil recounted his adventures in Nanvia. It was an innocent tale, and it distracted his mind. How does Basil think we'd travel with a child to the oracle? It was a question for another time, but before Basil earned enough gem to purchase 9. Based on his profits and recent windfalls, Basil estimated he would have enough after the crusade passed through Trelia. His estimate is optimistic. Jasper then listened in, as X3 pretended to be the fur merchant known as Myocaster. His sales declined after the crusade passed into Ikasu's pleasant weather. He expected business to return once the campaign crossed into Gia. For once, I'm glad I won't have to listen to him price gouge the merchants over the furs that Citrine gave him for free. He has the easiest cover story by far. X4 waited as his brigadier general hounded Master Watercress for the words of wisdom of the mages. Jasper rolled his eyes. He had no interest in the words, but even from the opposite side of the campsite, Jasper knew the master would never divulge the secret. Apparently, X4 recognized that too, for he sighed when the officer asked again. Jasper had a duty to protect X3 and X4, but otherwise didn't care for them. X3 was a sleazy salesman, and X4 lacked a personality. While Jasper processed the other conversations running in his background, he turned his attention back to Basil, whose friendship he enjoyed, even if it currently was a one-way relation. I want to live in Ikasu after attending the Mages' College, Basil said to Teleos and Anastasia. Crusade was probably off cooking the fish that Anastasia couldn't eat. It's perfect here. It doesn't feel caged like Sithika did in the Weather Mage's Barrier. This whole kingdom is perfect. You can walk forever without needing to turn back. I love it. I wouldn't live anywhere but the tundra, but I understand why this land appeals to you, Anastasia said. I wouldn't mind returning to the Carey lands, I'd grow a thicker outer skin layer and be perfectly comfortable there until the end of my days. I need to stop mentally joining into their conversations. I'll go wherever there's gem to be made, Telios said. Many have to survive that way, Basil said. Jasper doubted Basil understood the reality behind his words, but rather parroted them off to create a sense of empathy. Jasper didn't think lesser of Basil for it. The wizard had displayed remarkable wisdom and bonds of friendship at other times. Anate snorted, and Jasper wondered if she shared his thoughts. To be fair, what would a healing mage know of survival? Jasper reckoned with himself. Likely a great deal, given it was the art of the healer's trade. But he also noted that there were different types of survival. In response to short-term dilemmas, healers were great. Long-term survival on his own, Basil would only fare marginally better than Brusite would. Still, Basil has a wide range of practical knowledge. Anate, I made you dinner, Brusite said. Jasper assumed Brusite returned with the cooked trout in hand. Because Jasper listened to the encounter from the comfort of his tent, he did not see Brusite return with the haul. He imagined Brusite's smug expression. Trout? Anate's guessed. Actually, I cooked the trout and gave it to Basil and Telios. Instead, I caught a fisher for you, Brusite said. Jasper's heart sank at the gesture. Basil, you bastard, you told him. Basil sounded self-righteous. Everyone gets what they wanted. Brusite has the pleasure of making you dinner and got some extra hunting practice in along the way. I didn't get what I wanted. I got stuck 3 times with a fishing hook for some subpar trout, Telios grumbled. Brusite ignored Telios. I trust you aren't allergic to fisher meat as well. His boots' movement in the grass signaled him approaching her, presumably with the meal in hand. Leather skid across metal. Anates must have brushed his armor's plating with her gloved hand. In fact, I am not. Thank you for your fresh kill. Brusite went on to describe how he trapped and killed the fisher on his own. Telios and Basil both sounded perturbed that they wasted the effort of catching the fish, but Anates didn't take heed of their gripes. She didn't sound impressed, but Jasper speculated that speaking of hunts reminded her of home and brought a smile to her face. What he would give to see that smile. He'd keep the conversation playing in the background, as with his other 2 ear channels, but he switched his primary focus to listen to another conversation somewhere random in camp. Someone was looking for white flowers. I bet they're hallucinogenic. Jasper switched somewhere else. Today would be my father's 60th birthday. Switch. I can't wait until Trelia to stick my dick into pussy again. Jasper noted the soldier's identity and switched again. Sire, you should not interfere. Can't you see that Basil is learning of suffering through life itself? Sire, the Archdemoness? What's the concern over Basil? Jasper waited to learn the answers to his questions before switching again. He's still naive, Sire said. You don't even have a plan. You just skulk around like a stalker, an unknown voice said. Blessing one person makes you any less stalker-like? I doubt it. Perhaps I should curse the young Carrie girl and see how that affects him. Perhaps I could curse Watercress himself. Jasper sat up in his tent, concerned. Fontme had blessed X2. Is that who's speaking to Sire? I never thought I'd meet an Archdemoness, but if Sire intends to harm Anates, I'll become the first person to discover how to slay an Archspawn of old. Watercress will not be a pawn in your gambit, the Archangel said. And what good would cursing the girl do? She knows pain. If anything, she can teach Basil its significance. Perhaps the slave boy, then, turn his project into a failure. Nine's a prophet. What would happen if he chose to become an oracle in death while being cursed? He would probably foretell the end of the world. Sire snickered to herself, as though she had told a joke only she was privy to. How is it that all these fantastical creatures have stumbled upon Basil by accident? Isn't it strange? Perhaps destiny? I don't see how it matters, the Archangel said. Following the distinct sound of their conversation, Jasper slinked through the campsite toward the Archangel and Archdemoness to learn why they were interested in a wizard apprentice. If they're concerned over his well-being, could it be that Basil is... No, it's impossible. And yet, what other plausible reason could there be? I simply find it curious. I do have his best interests in mind, after all. I want him to be a whole person, well-balanced, spiritually, emotionally, and all the rest that angelist priests preach. Coseir's dragging tone sounded like she enjoyed the banter. Inducing misery is not going to make him emotionally balanced. Experiencing misery is the only way to become emotionally stable. You can't enjoy the pleasure of life without knowing its sicknesses too. Coseir countered. Knowing how to forgive is an important lesson, but without someone to need to forgive, he'll never learn. He needs to learn how to forgive Zalafin, the archangel advocated. She betrayed him, even though she was supposed to be his friend. Coseir laughed. Jasper crept closer to the argument. The pair appeared to be ordinary humans, but he confirmed the archangel as Vantame, recalling her likeness from her sculpture in the Cathedral of the Grateful. Coseir's face was slenderer than Vantame's, and her expression was less receptive as well. Her angled brows highlighted her ferocity, whereas Vantame's downturned wide eyes gave a pitiful look to her face. That is child's play, Coseir sneered when she finished snickering. True forgiveness stems from deep understanding. He needs to learn empathy. I agree he needs empathy, but let him learn it on his own. Vantame gestured as though physically pleading with the archdemon. Don't make matters worse than they need to be. He experiences it through his time as a healing mage. He understands suffering. No, he recognizes suffering. He doesn't understand it. Not truly. Not yet. I disagree, Vantame said firmly. We're at a standstill then. Jasper revealed himself to the pair when their conversation stopped making substantial progress. Good evening, ancient ones, he greeted. Both turned to look at him with suspicion. Who are you? Coseir demanded. My name is Jasper of Emphenai. I overheard your conversation from my tent, and I am curious about your interest in Basil. You are not human, Vantame recognized. This is not a matter for non-humans, Coseir said. Whatever you are. I have a personal stake in Basil's well-being, even if I am not human. I would be most gracious if either of you would explain your interest in him, Jasper said, maintaining a calm composure. You're the offspring of that Bernese beast, aren't you? Coseir asked. Nandanth is my mother. Jasper imagined his mother would relish the archdemoness's descriptor. Vantame stepped forward between Coseir and Jasper. I apologize, but this business does not concern you. Jasper nodded. Very well. I bid the two of you good evening. The two Archspawn of old did not return to their previous conversation, as Jasper had hoped, but rather faded away into nothingness behind him. It was just as well. Jasper understood their concerns without further explanation. The notion simultaneously intrigued and horrified him. It makes all the sense in the world for King Citrine to send the true Archspawn to the Oracle to discover what the next step in his journey should be. However, I have arguably the greatest responsibility to protect him, and I must not fail. Later the same evening, after Jasper fully contemplated the implications of Basil being the Archspawn of their age, he turned his attention back to Anatase. She and Brucite laid in her tent together. Did you like the dinner? He asked. From light rustling of hair, Jasper imagined Brucite nuzzling her neck. I did. It was delicious, love. Jasper cringed at the word love. He knew he shouldn't invade their privacy. He knew it wasn't healthy. He knew he should turn his attention elsewhere, but he couldn't help himself. In a way, he could love her vicariously through their relationship. I'm glad, Brucite said. For a moment the two were silent, but then Brucite sang. Leaves are falling from the trees, taken by a gentle breeze. What is falling from the trees? The rain is falling from the trees, soon to join the quiet seas. What is falling from the trees? The wind is falling from the trees, sounding of a gentle tease. What is falling from the trees? Why do you do that? Anantes asked after he concluded the first 3 verses of the lengthy song. Sing? Crusade asked, confused. Yes, it calms me down and makes me content. My mother used to sing me to sleep when I was little to ensure I had good dreams. Do you not sing? Jasper knew why she found the concept of singing off-putting before she explained it. No, singing disturbs prey and draws in predators. The only time I would ever consider singing was if I knew without a doubt I was about to die, she said. Crusade whimpered. But we should be safe here, though. You're right. Please go on if you want. Jasper knew she wanted him to stop. The Carrie reserved singing for funerals. Thus, songs carried grim associations of death for her, regardless of their tune. Jasper wagered the only reason she told Crusade to continue was to make him feel better, because his dinner wasn't rubbish. Surprising even himself, Jasper pitied Crusade. We should get to bed. It's late, Crusade said. By the decreased sensation of her brain activity, she was already falling asleep, and no further sound came from their tent.